Tonight's episode is a brand new topic I have not covered before. So, travel with me to Eastern Europe, where folklore is as cold as Slavic winters and somehow even darker. Welcome back to Unexplained Encounters. I'm your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can follow me on Twitter @DarkPrevails. I hope you enjoy today's stories featuring tales of the unexplained from eyewitnesses in Slavic countries. If you want your story narrated on the show, send it to me at darkstories.org. Help Unexplained Encounters reach new heights by leaving a follow and rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Be sure to check out my upcoming and beautiful new book, Creepy Campfire Stories. It comes out July 8th, 2025. Pre-order it today on Amazon or via the link below. Thank you. Now, let's begin. The Stranger in the Forest. From Brummer. I've never told this story to anyone outside my family. Even now, so many years later, my hands shake when I think about it. Growing up in rural Croatia, we didn't talk much about the unexplainable. We were practical people with practical problems. But what happened to me when I was 17 changed everything I believe about this world and what might exist beyond it. And unfortunately, those events changed my life forever. I was raised by my grandmother in a small village near the Dinaric Alps. My parents drowned in the Adriatic Sea when I was only 2. A sudden storm, an overturned boat. That's all I know. I don't have memories of them. Maybe a few faded photographs my grandmother kept on the wooden shelf beside our small television. And my grandfather, he died even before I was born. So it was just my Bauk and me in our small house at the edge of the forest. We weren't poor exactly, but money was always tight. Bauk worked at the textile factory in the nearby town, sewing for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. Her hands were always rough, her fingers pricked with countless little scars from needles. Despite all that, she never complained. She would come home tired but would still prepare dinner, help me with my homework, tell me stories of the old country before I went to bed. When I turned 14, I started to hunt. At first, it was just snares, catching rabbits and the occasional pheasant. By the age of 16, I'd saved enough money to buy a second-hand rifle from the hardware store. This old Zastava M70 that had seen way better days. But it was mine, and I took extremely good care of it. Hunting became my passion, really. Partly because I enjoyed the quiet solitude of the forest. Partly because of the look on Baka's face when I brought home fresh meat. She would smile in a way that made the wrinkles around her eyes deepen, and she would pat my cheek, tell me I'm her little provider. Those moments made everything worthwhile. By the time I was 17, I was spending most of my free hours in the forest. After school, I'd grab my rifle, stuff some bread and cheese in my pocket, and head out until dusk. Baka never worried. These were our woods. I knew them better than I knew the streets of the village. On a late fall evening, everything changed. It was the day before payday, and we were down to our last few kuna. Baka had been working overtime for 2 weeks straight, trying to meet some special order from a client in Zagreb. She looked exhausted that morning. Her shoulders were all slumped over as she packed her lunch, which I noticed was a small piece of bread and some leftover beans. She hadn't even taken coffee for herself, saying she would just have some at the factory. "I'll bring something good for dinner," I promised, as she left for work. She gave me a tired smile and kissed my forehead, even though I was already taller than her by then. School dragged by that day. I couldn't focus on mathematics or literature, thinking about the forest, hoping I'd find something good out there. When the final bell rang, I raced home, changed clothes, grabbed my rifle, and set out. The afternoon was clear that day, but cold. I moved carefully, staying downwind, watching for any movement. Hours passed by without much luck. I spotted a deer once, but it was too far away, and it disappeared before I could get closer. As the afternoon faded into evening, I became desperate. The thought of returning home empty-handed, of seeing disappointment flicker across Bauk's tired face, I couldn't bear it. I decided to try one more area, a small clearing near the old logging road, where animals sometimes came to graze. The light was fading quickly. It was a new moon that night, and without its glow, the forest was growing darker by the minute. Stubbornness kept me going, even though I should have turned back by then. Just a bit longer, I told myself. Just until I find something. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. The sound of someone walking without even trying to be quiet. I turned quickly, ready to raise the rifle. A man was standing there about 10 meters away. Average height, dark short hair, and a face that seemed somewhat familiar, but I couldn't place it. He was wearing a jacket, dark pants, and hiking boots. Nothing strange about his appearance, yet something about him seemed odd. Perhaps it was the way he stood there so calmly, as if he'd been expecting to find me. "Good evening," he said, his voice pleasant and warm, which was even more eerie. "A fine night for a hunt, isn't it?" I lowered the rifle slightly, but kept my finger near the trigger. Strangers in these woods were rare, so I didn't trust him. "Yes," I answered cautiously. "I haven't had much luck today." He smiled. "Sometimes the forest keeps its treasures hidden." He stepped closer, and I noticed his eyes. Dark eyes. "You're Marko Petrovic, aren't you? Anna's grandson." My unease grew. Everyone knew everybody in our village. He knew me, obviously, but I didn't know him. "How do you know my name?" "Oh, I know many people around here," he said casually. "You know, I used to hunt these woods myself when I was about your age." He looked around with a strange expression, almost nostalgic. "My name is Vuksa. Well, some people used to call me that anyway." I didn't know anyone by that name, but it wasn't completely unfamiliar. An old-fashioned nickname that you might hear in stories from the previous generation. "So, you from the village?" I asked. "Yeah, long ago," he replied vaguely, then quickly changed the subject. "So how's school? You must be in your final year now." That caught me off guard. Why would this stranger care about my education? There was something disarming about his manner, a genuine interest that made me answer despite my suspicions. "It's fine. I'm doing well in most subjects." "And what will you do after? University? A trade?" I shrugged. "I haven't decided yet. Maybe mechanical engineering in Zagreb, if I can get a scholarship." "A good choice." He nodded approvingly. He always had a talent for understanding how things work, even as a kid. I froze. How would he know anything about me as a kid? I was about to demand an explanation when he continued. "Your grandmother must be proud. Anna always valued education. She wanted that for your father too, you know." "Oh, you knew my father?" His smile was sad now. "Yes, I knew him well. We were close." The conversation continued like this for about half an hour. Him asking questions about my life, my dreams, my memories. Me answering, partly out of politeness, partly out of a strange compulsion that I couldn't explain. He seemed to know so much about my family, dropping details about Bauk's garden, about the house before it got renovated, about traditions we kept that weren't very common in other families. Eventually, I noticed how dark it was getting. The forest was now covered in complete blackness, the only light coming from stars. "I really gotta go," I told him, remembering Bauk would be home soon. "My grandmother will be waiting." For a moment, something like pain crossed his face. Of course, he said quietly. Family is everything. Remember that, Marco. No matter what happens, family endures. The sincerity of his voice unsettled me. I told him a hasty goodbye and turned away, irritated now at how much time I'd wasted talking to this strange man instead of hunting. I'd be returning home empty-handed after all, and I hadn't wanted to disappoint my grandma. When I got back to the house, I could see Baka's small blue Zastava parked outside. She was already home, but there was something wrong. Even from a distance, I could see the front door was open, swinging slightly in the breeze. As I got closer, I noticed the windows, 2 of them, had been broken. There was shattered glass everywhere in the yard. My heart stopped then. It really felt like it did. I dropped my rifle and ran the last 100 meters or so, shouting for my grandmother. Baka! Baka! The inside of our house was chaos. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor, the small television smashed. And there, in the middle of the living room, lay my grandmother. Her purse was spilled open beside her. There was so much blood spreading from beneath her body, staining the old carpet I'd helped her clean last Sunday. My mind, my heart was a mess then. When you have to witness something like that in person, your mind and spirit sort of go blank. You think you'd want to scream in that situation, but some people just freeze up. I guess you could call it shock. I fell to my knees beside her, seeing 3 bullet wounds marked her chest and stomach. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing. She was already gone. My grandma had died alone and afraid while I was in the forest talking to some stranger. I mean it when I say the next few hours were a blur. Neighbors came running when they heard my screaming. Someone had called the police. I sat outside on the porch shivering, even though someone had draped a blanket over me. I answered question after question, repeating many answers the same way I did before. Yep, I was hunting. No, I hadn't seen anyone suspicious. No, we didn't have enemies. The police concluded it was a burglary gone wrong. Baka had likely come home and surprised the intruders, who panicked and shot her before fleeing. They had taken her jewelry, the few good pieces she had inherited from her mother, and the small cash box we kept in the kitchen cabinet. Not even enough to justify what they had done to her, to our lives. I lived with the Kovacs for 2 weeks while arrangements were made. They were neighbors. I was sent to Zagreb after that, to live with my mother's cousin and her husband. They were kind people who welcomed me into their home without a second thought. But they weren't my Baka. Nothing would ever replace her. For months, I didn't speak much. I went to school, did my chores, existed, barely. I felt so guilty. Kept telling myself if I had been home instead of in the forest, if I hadn't wasted my time talking to that man, Baka might still be alive. Or maybe I would have just died with her. But honestly, either seemed preferable to the hollow life I was living. It was nearly 6 months later when I finally started to emerge from my grief. One evening, my cousin Ivana and her husband Dragan invited some family over for dinner. This would be the first real social gathering I'd participate in since the funeral. After dinner, as we sat drinking coffee, the conversation turned to memories of my parents. "Your father, Devor, was always so serious, even as a boy," Ivana said, smiling fondly. "Your grandfather used to say he was born 40 years old." I nodded. I'd heard this same stuff before from Baka. Then, I don't know why, perhaps because it was the first time I felt connected to these people who shared my blood, I mentioned the strange man from the forest. I told them. The day Baka died, I met a man in the woods while out hunting. He said he knew my father, and he said his name was Vuksa. The room went silent. Ivana's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. Dragan and his brother exchanged looks. "What did you say?" Ivana asked. "Vuksa," I repeated. "That's what he called himself. He knew all sorts of stuff about our family, about Bauk's garden, about—" "Marco," Ivana interrupted. "Vuksa was your father's nickname when he was young, and only family ever called him that, and they stopped by the time he turned 18. It came from how he used to track animals in the forest like a wolf. Vuk or Vuksa. Nobody has called him that in decades." I felt cold suddenly. "What did he look like?" Dragan asked gently. I described him. Average height, dark hair, dark eyes. As I went on, Ivana went to a bookshelf and returned with a photo album. She flipped through it, then turned it around to show me a photograph. "Like this?" she asked. The photograph showed a young man, maybe 20, standing beside a lake. He was smiling, carefree, and he had dark hair the same length as that man, same eyes, and he was wearing the same exact clothes. The man from the forest. There was no mistaking it. "Who is he?" I asked, though I already knew, because I'd seen pictures of this man, but when he was in his early 30s. Ivana spoke. "Your father, Devor. This picture was taken before he met your mother. You probably wouldn't have seen it in the photographs you already have." I stared at the picture. The man I met could not have been my father because my father was dead, had been dead for over a decade. Yet the resemblance was undeniable, and the nickname, and the clothes. "I think he saved your life," Dragan said after a long silence. "If you had come home when those men came, just walked in unknowingly holding a gun, I don't think you would have come out alive." That was a good point. All these months I'd blamed myself and blamed the stranger, my father, for distracting me. But if he hadn't kept me talking in the forest, I would have come home when the burglars came, and I'd likely be dead alongside my grandmother. Was it possible? Had my father somehow reached across the divide between life and death to protect his son? Or was it just a coincidence? A hunter who resembled my father, who knew our family, who happened to be in the right place at the exact right time. Even now, I don't have answers. Maybe it wasn't my dad. Maybe it was the biggest, life-saving coincidence of all time. After all, science would say that's impossible. That grief and shock can make you see connections that aren't real. But in my heart, I know what I saw, and I know it was real. Well, after all these years, I'm alive and well. I've got a wife, and we're planning on having kids soon, unless this war spreads. I still hunt occasionally, but I'm happy to say that it's no longer a necessity. I'm much better off than I've ever been. And someday when I do have those kids, I'll be teaching them to hunt too. I hope I can be there for them on their best and their worst days. Have you ever heard of the Bauk from Anon? Growing up, my mom would tell me about creatures that stalked the night from folklore, about the Bauk that waited in dark corners for drunks and fools. I used to laugh at it. But now I lock my doors before sunset, and I keep the lights on a little extra longer. This happened just a few years ago in my village near Plovdiv, Bulgaria. Small place, maybe 400 people, which is crazy considering how close we are to Plovdiv, which is the second biggest city in Bulgaria. In my small village, everyone knew that I drank too much and fought too often with my wife Elena. I'm not proud of the man I was then, to be quite truthful with you. I was half tempted not to tell you those parts of the story, but they seem important. The factory where I worked back then was cutting hours, and money was tight. and I dealt with it the way my father taught me, at the bottom of a bottle. That night, it was November 12th, my youngest son's birthday. I'd been at the tavern since finishing my half shift at 2 p.m., and Elena called around 8, screaming that I'd missed his birthday dinner. She told the bartender not to let me drive our car home. Like I needed that humiliation in front of everyone. And I did. I slammed the phone down and ordered another rakia. By 11 p.m., I was the last one there. The owner finally kicked me out, keeping my car keys like my wife had asked. "Take the shortcut through town," he said. "And for God's sake, stay on the main road. Don't go near the old mill." I nodded, but I already decided I would take whatever path I wanted. I was too drunk to listen to him. The walk from the tavern to my house normally takes about half an hour. That night, it felt like hours. It was unusually quiet, too. That's what I noticed first. At that time of year, you always hear something, like people's dogs in their yards or wild animals in the nearby woods. But that night, there wasn't a peep. Just my own footsteps and breathing, which was pretty loud. I took the back way, partly to spite Elena, partly because it was shorter. This path went past the abandoned flour mill at the edge of the village. Place has been empty since the Soviets left. Locals avoid it, say it's bad luck. Maybe 15 minutes into my walk, I noticed something strange. The street had only one working lamp, and it cast my shadow on the gravel. But when I looked at it, my shadow didn't look right at all. It moved differently from me, I swear. I stopped, and I swear it stopped half a second later. I raised my arm and the shadow raised its arm, but not exactly like I did. Just drunk, I told myself. But I felt suddenly cold, despite all the alcohol warming my blood. I went a little faster then, but a few seconds later I heard soft footsteps. Footsteps that weren't mine, and they sounded less human than I'd been expecting. Like an animal walking on soft paws, like a padding sound, and there was the occasional scratching. When I stopped to listen, the sounds stopped too. When I was near the old mill, I saw something move between the broken windows, something hunched over and dark. I squinted, trying to focus my drunken vision. I saw just enough then to see that it was about the height of a large dog, but definitely shaped wrong. Its arms and legs were gangly, with a head that was a bit too big to fit its body. Now, I'm not a scared man. I've worked night shifts alone in the factory with dangerous machinery. I've broken up bar fights and faced down angry men with knives. But something about the shape that I glimpsed then made my skin crawl. "Hey!" I shouted. "Who's there?" The response I got was a clicking sound, like teeth chattering together rapidly. Then silence. I hurried past the mill, no longer caring if it was the longer way home. The main road had more streetlights, and suddenly that seemed important to me. As I walked, I felt eyes on me. Not just watching, though, like they were studying me. Like a cat would watch a mouse before pouncing on it. Halfway down the street, I glanced back and saw it clearly for the first time. It was moving between two houses, not even trying to hide anymore. Matted fur covered its body, so dark it seemed to absorb what little light there was. And its face I will see in my dreams forever. Too big for its body, a wide mouth full of needle-like teeth that clicked together constantly. Its eyes glowed a greenish-yellow light, like a cat's but much larger, and maybe even smarter. It walked on all fours, but sometimes it would rise up on its hind legs, almost human-like but distorted. I ran then. No pride could keep me from running. All I had in me was fear pumping through my veins, burning away what alcohol was left. The creature followed me, It wasn't exactly running, but it kept pace. When I turned left, it herded me right with a burst of speed and a snarl. When I tried to cut through the churchyard, it was somehow ahead of me in an instant, forcing me back to the road. Even a drunken fool like me could tell it was trying to steer me somewhere, herd me like some sheep. Every time I tried to take a more direct path home, it would just cut me off, forcing me toward the edge of the village where the forest was. Only when I passed under streetlights would it hang back, staying in the dark. But as soon as I entered the dark again, I could hear it breathing, heavy and wet panting, just a few meters behind me. Eventually, I found myself on my own street, thank God. My house was only about 50 meters away. This was the most populated part of the village now. I thought the creature would be long gone, or at least keeping its distance, but I could hear it closer than before. There was a clicking coming from its mouth, and I swear it sounded excited. I fumbled with my keys at the front gate. They slipped from my sweaty hands, so I bent over to retrieve them, and I thought I felt breath on the back of my neck. There was a smell then, like rotting meat and rotting soil. I felt paralyzed. A low growl vibrated against my back. Not like a dog's growl, but deeper, with an almost human quality to it. Like there might have been words in there too. And suddenly I felt fur or bristles brush against my hand. I grabbed my keys, yelled, and ran. And the next thing I knew, I was inside my house, locking the door and leaning against it, gasping for air. Elena started to yell about me being late, but stopped when she saw my face. "What in the world happened to you?" she asked. I couldn't explain. I didn't know how to tell an already angry wife that the freaking boogeyman just chased me. But it wasn't over after that. Not exactly. Scratching sounds came from our windows and doors occasionally at night. I wasn't the only one hearing it either. Elena heard it too. We told ourselves it was a stray dog or a fox, but I knew those animals don't scratch 6 feet up at a door. After that night, I found in our fence tufts of coarse black fur that didn't seem to match any animals in our region. I even took it to the local veterinarian, who could not identify it. "Too coarse for a wolf, I'd say," he said, "and too long for a bear. What have you gotten yourself into?" he asked. I didn't have a drink for 2 weeks after that. When I finally went back to the tavern, there was a man there I recognized. I'll call him Old Ivan. He was our village's oldest resident. We talked from time to time whenever I caught him in there, and so I went up to Ivan and described to him about the night I'd had. "Sounds like the Bauk," he said. "It comes for drunks like you, for people weakened by their vices. Tries to lead them into the forest." "And what happens when it gets them there?" I asked. "Nobody really knows. Nobody it leads there ever comes back." "But whatever it was didn't get me," I said. "No, you are lucky. Or perhaps it's still deciding about you." The way he said that last part really creeped me out. That was just the extra tap I needed to really get my crap together. I don't drink as much anymore. I get home before dark. I fix the broken lights around our property whenever they need fixed. I'm there when I need to be there, for my wife and my kids. And life is better now. And I feel like the biggest a-hole to have ever missed my kid's birthday. What in the world was wrong with me? And I've never forgotten that encounter, nor the stories of the Bauk. Because now I do believe the stories. Sometimes folklore is more than just that. And if you stay out too late, drinking too much, and walk home alone in the dark, you might find out for yourself. The Thing by the Creek, from GlueBerry. I was 8 years old when I saw it. Summer of 2004, so Not that long ago, really. Nobody believes my story except my grandparents. My grandfather in particular always said, "Don't go to the creek after the church bells." And I didn't listen. My parents sent me from Belgrade to stay with my grandparents in their village every summer. They thought the country air would be good for my asthma. One of the first things I realized was that city kids don't understand village rules. But the village kids do, of course. That's where the Drekovic hunts. The local children would whisper when we played near the creek. It takes children who wander alone. I remember rolling my eyes when I first heard that, though still being young enough that I took it to heart a little bit, enough to make me creeped out whenever it seeped back into my mind. I'm not gonna say city kids don't believe in monsters. We just believe in different kinds of monsters, usually person-shaped ones. The ones that wear hoods and have baseball bats and try to lure you outside. I remember everything about that day. The argument with the village boys who said I was too small to climb the big willow. The way I stayed behind to prove I could do it after everyone left for dinner. The sticky July heat and the mosquitoes. The sudden realization that the sun was setting. My grandparents would be worried about me, I remembered thinking. I jumped down from the willow and started the walk home along the creek path. And it was then that I heard something. A cry that was, at first, soft, sort of like a whimpering baby. I stopped. Why would a baby be out here? Babies didn't live near the creek, and the closest house to it was about half a kilometer away. The crying grew louder, sounded desperate. It was coming from the bushes across the creek. "Hello?" I called. "Are you hurt?" The moment I said that, the crying stopped, and at the same time, I was filled with regret. Something began to move over there. Not a child, not a baby, something else. I should have run, but instead I decided to step closer. The movement stopped too. Then came a different sound, not crying now. This was a high and thin sound, like, it's hard to describe, like someone trying to imitate my voice.
"Hello?"
It called back. My exact tone, my exact voice. I felt sweaty all of a sudden. I began to back away then. Something pale began to shift in the bushes. I caught a glimpse of eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. Yellow eyes. I turned to run, and then it screamed. The most bizarre and horrific sound I'd ever heard. Not human and not animal, but something not of this world. If you've ever heard a sound like that, it's the type of sound that will make your bladder go weak and your legs turn to jelly. It was like death in the form of vibrations. I ran away, going so fast the path ahead became a blur. The screaming followed me, sometimes from the left and sometimes from the right. I tripped over myself near the cemetery, cutting my knee open on a rock. When I looked up again, there was something standing on a grave marker, only 20 meters away from me. It was definitely not a person, not a man, not a child. It was something with a dog's body, but all too wrong. It was very, very thin and longer. Its face was long and stretched, almost wolf-like, but not quite. Its mouth was open far too wide, filled with sharp teeth. And those yellow eyes were looking at me. It stepped down from the grave. I remember thinking this couldn't be real. But the pain in my knee proved it was. The warm blood on my leg was very real. The smell of wet fur was real too. The thing took a step towards me, and another. That cemetery was between me and my home. I couldn't just go around. The creek was too deep there, and I couldn't go back. The sun was almost down too. It would be far too dark. It opened its mouth even wider, and suddenly, the church bells rang. The creature flinched, then looked back at me, hesitating. Then it made a sound like a frustrated dog whine, before slinking backward into the shadows between graves. I took the moment, and I ran, past the cemetery, through the field, into the village. I didn't stop until I made it back to my grandparents' house. Grandpa took one look at me, muddy and bloody and white-faced, and he knew in an instant, but he didn't ask any questions. Just pulled me inside, locked the door, and placed some salt on the windowsills. He made me drink water with 3 drops of holy oil, then washed my cut in alcohol. "Won't be staying out too late again, will ya?" he told me. Not even a question, really. I nodded. For 3 nights after, I heard crying outside my window in the distance, coming from the church or the area around it. Each night it sounded less like a baby, and more like my own voice. On the 3rd night, my grandfather had the house blessed, and even took some holy yard down to the yard and to the path to the creek. And from then on, I didn't hear the crying again, and I never went back to that creek alone. As an adult now, whenever, for any reason, I go out into the country, maybe visiting my grandparents or on vacation, I sprinkle some salt on the windowsills, because it makes me feel better. Touch of the Likho. From Magda. I still have the stone. It sits on my desk while I'm writing this, though I'll likely find it somewhere else tomorrow morning. 5 months have gone by since that old woman gave it to me, and I've stopped fighting it now. I'll start at the beginning. After my divorce last year, I inherited my great-aunt's house in Brezhny, a town in eastern Slovakia that I barely remembered from my childhood visits. I'm an architect by training, so my plan was straightforward. Renovate the old place, sell it for a profit, and return to Prague to restart my business. The village was supposed to be a brief chapter in my life. I speak enough Slavic to get by. I remember my parents insisting on it when I was little, but not enough to truly connect with the locals. Most days I spent alone, just measuring rooms and drafting renovation plans. Anything to not think about my failed marriage and ex-husband. The day everything changed was ordinary at first. Tuesday after Easter. It was lightly raining that day. I was at the market, calculating tile measurements for the kitchen remodel in my head as I browsed for things. I noticed her by the potato vendor. This thin elderly woman struggling with several bags. As I watched, one bag split open, sending potatoes rolling across wet cobblestones. I hurried over. "Dovolte mi pomoct," I said in clumsy Slavic. I was trying to say, "Allow me to help you." She looked up with a grateful nod, so maybe I didn't speak it so clumsily after all. I immediately noticed her left eye, clouded completely white. Her clothes were torn but clean, patched in several places. After we picked up her potatoes, I offered to carry home her groceries with her. She waited and eventually said, "Dokujem," meaning thank you. We walked slowly to one of those gray, brutalist apartment blocks across the square. Along the way, we chatted a bit. She asked where I was from, why I'd come to Brezhny, and if I was married. I answered politely, struck by how intently she studied me with that one good eye of hers. Her apartment, when we arrived, I noticed, was small but immaculate. She had these folk embroideries hung on the walls between faded photographs, and the air smelled of paprika and dried herbs. I set her groceries down. I then saw this smooth oval stone on a shelf nearby, sitting alone on a small doily. A thin and curved line was etched into its surface, resembling a closed eye. "Interesting," I said, pointing at it. Her expression changed subtly. You like?" "It is unusual." "It's very old," she said, taking the stone in her palm. "Was gift." She extended her hand toward me. "For you." "Oh, I couldn't do that." "Please." She sounded urgent all of a sudden. "For helping old woman. Good luck." She pressed the stone into my hand. It felt warm. "Dvoyakas," she murmured. If I heard her right, it sounded like she was saying, "Your turn now." But at the time, I took that as just a way of saying, "Pay it forward, you know?" Maybe she was saying it to herself, a reason to gift me this stone that I took an interest in. I slipped the stone into my coat pocket, planning to just get rid of it somewhere on my way home. When I went outside, the rain got worse, and I hurried straight back to my great aunt's place. By evening, I'd forgotten about it entirely, until I emptied my pockets, and I found it waiting there. I placed it on my bookshelf between some architecture magazines, then went to bed. The next morning, I found it on my kitchen counter. I frowned, trying to remember if I'd moved it while making tea or something. I had been distracted lately. My mind was preoccupied with renovation details and other things from my past. I returned it to the bookshelf. That day, my laptop just crashed out of nowhere, making me lose 3 days of work on the kitchen design. The backup files were even corrupted. I wanted to scream. Around noon, I received an email from my most reliable contractor, saying he had taken another job and could not start my project until autumn. Small things, sure. Coincidences, maybe. That evening, I noticed the stone was now on my dining table. Over the next week, the minor inconveniences kept going. My washing machine leaked, ruining a box of expensive tiles. My favorite coffee mug just cracked. I developed a paper cut that wouldn't heal properly. My normally sound sleep became fragmented with unsettling dreams that I couldn't really remember upon waking up. And that stone, well, it kept moving. No matter where I placed it, bookshelf, kitchen drawer, storage box, it would just reappear somewhere else. The bedside table, the bathroom sink, the windowsill, wherever it darn well pleased. I'm losing my mind, I muttered to myself one morning, placing the stone firmly in my coat pocket. I walked to the charity shop near the village square and donated the coat, stone still in the pocket. The young volunteer smiled and thanked me. That evening, the stone was on my pillow. I kid you not. The following Tuesday, I went to the market. While doing my typical shopping, I was hoping to see the old woman again. Perhaps I could give the stone back to her, make some excuse about it. But she wasn't there. When I asked about her at the vegetable stall, the vendor crossed herself. Pani Volokova, she died 2 days after Easter. Died? I just saw her. I thought about it for a second. The Tuesday I'd helped her had been the day after Easter Monday. Oh, the vendor said. She went peacefully in her sleep. After so many years of trouble, God granted her rest. Did you know her? I helped her carry groceries home once. She gave me this stone as thanks. She gave me a quick smile, then turned away to help another customer. I just stood there. That woman had died very quickly after giving me that stone. At home, I began to search for things, because all of this was way too coincidental to me. I googled haunted stone and Slavic legends, and I happened upon something that matched my situation far too well. Likho. Basically a form of bad luck attachment, symbolized by a single eye, something that can be transferred from person to person, often through objects. This is ridiculous, I said aloud to my empty kitchen. Despite the coincidence, it still seemed way too unbelievable. Be rational, I told myself. But the next time I saw the stone, it had moved again. Now it was sitting by the sink. I did some more Googling, this time about possible Likho resolutions and cures. I read about putting salt and bread by the door. It sounded so silly, but that night, despite feeling foolish, I left a small dish of salt and a piece of bread by my front door. It sounds crazy, but the next morning, the bread was gone. Maybe it was taken by a stray cat. Who knows? The salt was scattered all over, too. And the stone had moved to my bedside table. The inconveniences continued. Nothing crazy. I wasn't in some horror movie with bleeding walls or demonic possession. Just persistent, annoying bad luck. A pipe would leak, ruining part of my renovation work. A prospective client might cancel a project. A mild and ongoing cough. But then I had a dream one night, where I saw Pani Volokova, that old woman with the milky eye. She was standing at the foot of my bed, watching me with her good eye. She stared for a long time, then nodded. When I woke up, I found the stone had moved again. Not entirely disturbing, but definitely unsettling. Upon more research, I found that the Likho could be transferred. Some sources said it had to be transferred willingly, not just abandoned. That I have to give it to someone that actually wants it, whether they know what it is or not. Guess that's why trying to donate it in a coat didn't work. I considered my options that night. I could try to pass the stone to someone else, but the thought of it made me sick. How could I knowingly trick someone into taking a curse like this? I thought about the old woman. Maybe she was a good person, but after experiencing this for years, they added up, and she ended up desperate to get rid of it. In the end, I placed the stone in a small wooden box that had belonged to my great-aunt. I sat it on the mantelpiece and said aloud, "You can stay, but this is your place now, in this box." That was a couple months ago. The stone still occasionally moves. I'll find it on the kitchen table or by my bed, but less frequently. The string of minor misfortunes continues, but not as often. Last week I spilled coffee on important documents. Yesterday, I missed a call from a potential client because my phone died unexpectedly. But when I charged it, I called them back, and everything was okay. I am adapting. I back up my work obsessively now. I leave earlier for my appointments and anticipate delays. And all my supplies and food I keep extra of. And I haven't had any more disturbing dreams either. Just be careful who you help out there. I know it's a kind of crappy message to take away from this, but if you do help someone and they seem desperate to give you a certain gift, maybe rethink taking it. Perhaps the true moral of this story is, don't expect payment or take the payment when offering help to people in need. The Dorms Live-In Ghost, from BG. I went to university to study medicine. Our university is one of the oldest in this part of Eastern Europe. The main campus dates back to the 1800s, I think, but our dorm, Dormitory 6 I'll call it, is said to be much older. It was originally a hospital during the wars, before eventually being converted to student housing in the 1970s. The building stands apart from the other dorms. It's got red brick and is 4 stories, with narrow windows and ornate stonework around the entrances. I was assigned a room on the 3rd floor last September. Room 312, a corner unit with 2 small windows and just enough space for a bed, a desk, and a wardrobe. My roommate, I'll call her Katya, never showed up. She transferred to another university at the last minute, according to administration. I was secretly relieved to have the space to myself for some time. The first month was just fine. I attended classes, made some friends, adjusted to university life. Sometimes the heating pipes would cling at odd hours, but that is normal in the older buildings. Other times I'd hear footsteps in the hallway at night, when most students would be asleep. Again, nothing unusual in a building housing so many students. A month after that, I woke up at around 3:17 a.m. I remember because I checked my phone. The room felt significantly colder than when I'd fallen asleep. I assumed that's why I woke up. My breath was foggy too. I assumed the heating had failed for whatever reason, and I was about to go grab another blanket when I noticed someone sitting at my desk. I stopped right where I was. The figure was slender, seemingly female, with light-colored hair. She was wearing what looked to be a pale blue uniform of some kind. Her back was to me, and she seemed to be writing something down. "Hello?" I whispered, wondering if another student had entered my room by mistake. The figure didn't respond or turn towards me. I reached for the lamp beside my bed, and in the second it took me to find the switch, the desk chair was empty. The room remained freezing after that, for another hour before gradually getting warmer. I was convinced it was a dream, a waking dream. I didn't mention it to anyone because it didn't seem important. A week after that, I met someone named Mila from room 317 in the communal kitchen. She looked extremely tired, dark circles around her eyes and all that. "Not sleeping well?" I asked. "This building," she muttered. She was steeping some tea and waiting for it to get done. "Do you ever feel like someone's watching you study?" I recently thought about my supposed waking dream and said, "Yeah? But what do you mean exactly, in your case?" "It's stupid," she shook her head. "Sometimes when I'm at my desk, especially late at night, I feel, I don't know, not alone. Like someone's standing right behind me, reading over my shoulder. And my room gets so cold sometimes. Just my room, not even the hallway." "Have you told administration?" I asked. "I had issues with the cold myself recently. Maybe it's a problem we need to bring up." "I don't think it's a problem with the heating. And what would I tell them, that I have ghost stories for them?" She laughed. "They'd think I was making something up to get a room transfer, because of the whole bathroom situation." To explain that part, the third floor's communal bathroom was notorious for weak water pressure and inconsistent heating. Many students tried to find excuses to transfer to other floors with better facilities. After that conversation, I began to notice more things. I swear my books would be rearranged on my shelf whenever I was gone. At one point, my desk chair turned around in the morning when I was certain I'd pushed it in. There was also persistent cold that would come and go, seemingly whenever it chose to. Always around the same early morning hours, though. Then came the incident with Pavel from 309. Pavel wasn't a friend, just someone I nodded to in the hallways. He was a computer science student who kept to himself. I was returning from a late study session at the library when I found him sitting in the third floor hallway, back against the wall, staring at his room door. "Are you okay?" I asked. He jumped suddenly, then looked up. I didn't mean to scare him. "Oh, didn't see you there. Yeah, I'm fine." I looked at how stressed out he looked. "Are you sure?" He then asked something very strange. "Well, do you ever see her?" "Who exactly?" "The nurse or doctor, whatever she is." I sat down beside him. Tell me about it." "I was coding. I have a project due tomorrow. It was around 2 a.m. I went to get water from the bathroom, and when I came back, there was a woman standing by my computer, looking at the screen. She was wearing this blue uniform thing, like an old hospital uniform, and her hair was in a kind of cap or bun. I thought it was another student playing a joke, but when I spoke to her, she turned and..." He stopped. "What did she do?" "Well, her face wasn't right. Not deformed or anything, but just sad. Impossibly sad. And old-fashioned, like from a different time." He glanced at his door. "She walked into the wall and just disappeared. Just like that. I'm not going back in there tonight. Honestly surprised I'm telling someone this crazy crap." "Look," I told him, "I believe you. Because now that you say it like that, I think I saw her not too long ago." I explained my story to him. I realized then that what I saw was not a dream. Afterwards, I convinced him to stay in the common room until morning. Word spread after that. Other third-floor residents began to share their experiences. Irina in 301 regularly heard someone opening and closing drawers in her wardrobe at night. Sasha in 315 woke repeatedly to find his textbooks open to different pages than he'd left them. Daniel in 320 reported his shower turning ice cold exactly 17 minutes after he turned it on, every single time. We started to research the building's history, but the archives were not very helpful. It was mostly blueprints and renovation records. Eventually, someone found an old newspaper clipping. During the building's hospital years, a young nurse named Katerina had worked the night shift on the 3rd floor. She died during a typhus outbreak in 1919, continuing to care for her patients until collapsing at her station. According to the article, she was known for checking on patients at regular intervals through the night, particularly 3 a.m. Somehow knowing her story made it less scary, more sad than anything. After that, students decided to try to leave offerings for her. Pens or notebooks or cups of tea that would be cold by morning. Others avoided the 3rd floor entirely, too creeped out now, and arranged to sleep elsewhere. My most vivid encounter came during finals week in December. I was up late studying, fighting sleep, when my desk lamp flickered. The temperature then began to drop. I didn't turn around though, just kept highlighting my notes. Wondering if Katerina was there, I said quietly, "I'm just trying to study, like you're trying to work." From the corner of my eye, I swear I saw her standing beside me. I smelled something like antiseptic and lavender. For nearly an hour, I continued to study, and I swear she continued to stand there. When I finally decided to turn to look directly at her, she was gone, but not instantly. I caught her fading blue uniform, as if I'd seen the last bit of her as she disappeared. Or maybe I was just hoping to see something, and there was nothing actually there. The strangest part, though, I wasn't afraid that whole time. It felt like studying alongside a dedicated senior student, if anything. After winter break, I requested a room transfer, not because I was scared of Katerina, but from the exhaustion of the constant cold. Nowadays, I'm on the 1st floor of Dormitory 3, where it's warmer, quieter, and utterly normal. These stories were nice, weren't they? Some disturbing stories as usual, but a couple of fun and even wholesome ones. Thanks, Eastern Europe. Just remind me if I ever do come for a visit, to avoid the churchyards at night. Good night. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails, and you can follow me on X at DarkPrevails. Send me your stories at darkstories.org so I can narrate them. Leave a follow and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to help Unexplained Encounters keep going, so I can keep telling you scary stories. Or just pre-order my new book, Creepy Campfire Stories, available July 8th, but you can pre-order now on Amazon or via the link in the description. Thank you. Until next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.